Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on this Monday morning. We're ready to get started. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm not going to be sending you to directions of bathrooms or anything like that, but a very important note: you have tech support available to you. If you go to find, put something in the chat or directly communicate to folks. Holly Holloway, is that it, Holly? Yes. Erin, Belle, Destiny Carter, and Holly are all available to answer any of your tech questions along the way if we struggle. All right, so let's get started. Thank you for choosing to be here. By choosing to show up on a Monday on a virtual platform when we're all virtualed out at this point in 2020, you're creating the opportunity for yourself to engage with the wisdom of cognitive development experts and thought leaders who are shaping our community. You have the opportunity today to continually ask yourself the question, what am I capable of? And as you think of your team, your organization, and our community, you can ask the question, what are we capable of with collective efforts forward? And then in addition to that, you'll have the opportunity to consider actionable steps you can take to go beyond what you and your team have been up until now. This is truly the opportunity to think up and step into exceptional. So to do that, I'm going to invite you to maximum value. And most of us, in some at least subconscious way, believe that max value comes from observing others. When we show up to a conference, we subconsciously believe that the speaker is going to bring the value, and it's all external. There's no ownership there. So I'm going to invite you today for the next 3.5 hours to be thinking that max value equals full participation. And if you're not fully participating, you're avoiding. And in the virtual world, there is so much opportunity to avoid. Like right now, no one can see you. Perfect opportunity to start doing some emails, to make a quick phone call, to grab coffee, to go to the bathroom. You can choose that. And you will receive the value that you put into it. So I'm inviting you to silence everything just for this time. Be here for you and be here for what you're capable of. Now, the other thing that I'm going to ask you to do in that full participation is to ask questions. We have a unique platform utilized today that is going to give us the opportunity to engage in ways that you've never experienced virtually, likely. We're not just going to have speakers speaking to us. You're going to have the opportunity to meet with your table hosts. You'll see table hosts along the sides once you go back to the floor after the speakers are done. You're going to get a chance to have open discussion with the table about each of the speakers. You're going to have the opportunity to network. And most importantly, or in addition to all of that, I'm going to ask you to utilize the Q&A chat. The general chat gets you conversation in the moment. The Q&A chat will give you an opportunity to hear back from the speakers and from the ThinkUp professionals your questions about what you're hearing today. We likely will not have time to address them live, but we'll follow up with you after the summit. Finally, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask you to be here today with an open hand. Open-handed curiosity. Every nugget of information that you receive today, place it in your hand, and rather than grasping it as something that you know or don't know, just simply be curious about it. Don't judge it, just see it. And in fact, I invite you to listen for insight versus agreement. So many of us show up to listen to others, whether it's friends and family or other professionals, in meetings, and of course in a conference, to have the opportunity to look for agreement. We do it unconsciously. You'll see it. And as speakers, often we get excited to see the head shakes and the, oh, no, that doesn't make sense to me. When you notice yourself saying, I don't agree with that, I invite you to simply notice it. And rather than stay in that, ask yourself the question, but what if it was true? What value could it create? What opportunity doors would it open? All right, so let's do this. I want to first do a real quick thank you to all of our speakers. We have today with us Halerin Hilton Hill, a motivational speaker, radio and TV personality, and producer. Jerry Askew, president of the Alliance for Better Nonprofits. Catherine Porth Hill, founder of Let Her Speak. And Philip Dion, MD, board certified neurologist and author of Neuroplasticity, Your Brain's Superpower. You also have table hosts you have the opportunity to engage with on the floor after each speaker. Thank you for joining us today. Bob Camp, growth strategist and executive coach. Carol Slattis, Inventing Self. Claude Mapp, Advent Health. Dion John Hunt, Improving Life Center, LLC. Doug Minter, founder of Minter Consulting. And of course, Doug Mapp, founder of ThinkUp. All right, so let's get into our first speaker. Our first speaker today is Halerin Hilton Hill. He is a man with so many accomplishments that if I read the entire list here, I'd take up his whole speaker time. I encourage you to check out his website, halerinhill.com, for more. Halerin Hilton Hill is a Renaissance communicator who moves people with ideas. And it seems he has honed his talents to communicate in many forms. He's been a top-rated drive time radio talk show host for more than 27 years. For over a decade, he's produced and hosted the TV show Anything is Possible, seems fitting for today. And he has been a singer, songwriter, producer, and he's worked with many renowned artists, including Aretha Franklin and the late Whitney Houston. Halerin is the author of the best-selling self-help book, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which is also the cornerstone of his wisdom coaching enterprise. He has spent the last 20 years with working some of America's top organizations as a speaker and trainer. Here locally, we might know Pilot Flying J and Scripps Networks. Halerin is CEO and founder of Wisdom House, a multimedia company focused on inspiring people around the world to grow in wisdom. His philosophy, in fact, is to grow and help others grow. His mission to inspire, inform, and entertain was just recognized by thegrio.com as one of America's 100 history makers in the making. Let that sink in for a minute, because he's sitting there alongside the First Lady Michelle Obama and baseball all-star Jason Hayward. Halerin's a graduate of Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama, where he studied communications. He's married to Nidra, and they have 2 children, Halerin II, a University of Tennessee grad, and Haley Nicole, a rising high school senior, and maybe even older than that at this point. I'll give you the stage, Halerin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Stacy, and your remarks to get us started were just so important. What you said about being present in any given moment. If you can show up and if you can be really present in any given moment, you give yourself a great opportunity to grow. So first of all, I want to say thank you for letting me be on the platform today with you all, and thank you for everybody that's here with us today and for investing your time today. There's a difference between investing your time and spending your time. And the difference really is return, right? And so when you invest your time, there is a return. And what I hope is that in the 20 minutes that I have with you now, that you will get a return on the time that you are investing. But I think the most important thing is that you are investing in yourself. And by the way, let me note that that's not selfish. By you becoming a better version of you, you are going to place yourself in a position where you can serve at a higher level. And I'll be talking about that today. Let me state right on the front end what my intention is. My intention today is to encourage you to enjoy your life and to enjoy your work. And I'll tell you how I got here. But first, let me just break the word encourage apart into its components. It has a prefix, which will become very important in what I want to share with you today. The prefix en means to make, cause, or create. So if I'm here to encourage you, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the belief that you will keep going in the face of fear, right? So if I'm here to encourage you, I'm here to help you cause or create the courage that life takes. And life takes courage. So does joy. Well, let me just start at the beginning with a piece of my own story. I recently, as part of a course that I was taking, had to take a character strengths survey. It's about 250 questions, and it took a minute to get done. And I thought I had some sense of what my strengths are, my character strengths are. I thought I knew the order, the hierarchy. I'm definitely a creative person. And the creativity relates to joy, and I'll explain that in just a minute. I am a nerd by both confession and confirmation, and if there are any nerds on this on this Zoom or cast this morning, I identify with you. We watch Star Trek and we read encyclopedias just for the fun. We'd like to take things apart to see how they work. So I knew that about myself. I know that I'm analytical. I want to know how things work. I knew that would show up. I have a love of beauty. I love excellence anywhere I see it. I remember I would go to Las Vegas at least once a year just to watch Cirque du Soleil perform, because, and I think I went to every one of the Cirque du Soleil shows in Vegas. At one point, you know, they had the majority of the shows, and I would just go just to study the brilliance and excellence of it. And I can be swept away by seeing great art or great performance. I knew that was baked in there. There is a spiritual part to me, a spiritual dimension to me that longs to be purpose driven, to be working on things that are connected to something higher, that are doing something higher. I knew that, but I did not know that my number one character strength would be what it is, but it made sense after I found out. And I'll tell you how I found out. And kind of, this is what put me on this journey toward joy. The new work that I'm working on is called Joy 101, and it really is about how we think, and it really is about thinking up. As a kid, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, but I didn't live there long. We moved over to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My father was a minister, and he was a different kind of minister. I had never met before my father a minister that did not like to talk a lot. My father didn't talk a lot. He would craft these sermons, and then he would get up on Sabbath morning and he would deliver his message, and they never were really more than about 27 minutes. And this was in the age where preachers would go on, and you were judged by, it's almost like they were paying you by the minute. And but he would give these messages that were rich with illustrations, and then he would stop. And then for the rest of the week, he wouldn't say much. What he loved to do, though, was he loved to read. He loved to read. And a lot of people, you know, they will form that bond with their parents around something. You may have gone fishing, or you may have gone camping or hunting or played a sport or whatever. I think my father's sport was learning. On Sunday afternoons, he would go to the public library, and he would always pick up a couple of books. He had an upholstered chair in the corner of his room. And in the evenings, he would sit in the chair, and instead of watching television, he would read. And when he would go to the library on Sunday afternoon, he would take me with him. And I remember I would just kind of bounce over to the children's section, and I would find some book. And I'd get my book, and he'd get his books. And when we got back to the house, he'd be sitting in that upholstered chair. The right arm of the chair, I remember, was very frayed because my father would rub the right arm of the chair when he was excited or when he was worried or when he was thrilled or when he was terrified. He rubbed all of what he was experiencing in these books into the arm of the chair. And I remember rubbing my fingers across the slickness of that worn section of this chair, just feeling the intensity of the growth that was happening with him. I couldn't read as fast as my father could read, but I could turn pages as fast as he turned pages. So I would just sit there and turn pages until my brain caught up, and my brain caught up. There was an energy, though, that came off of my father as he was learning, as he was growing. And it was this joyful energy. I mean, my dad would read himself happy. Now, it didn't really stick to me until I really tried to suss out the beginning of his life. Born in 1923, Chattanooga, Tennessee. He was the oldest of 7. His father was an orphan that was raised in an orphanage. His father had a 4th grade education. His mother had about the same. They had 7 children. They were raised in an era that was defined by the word depression, the Great Depression. And yet my father had this wonderfully joyful spirit. It was unbelievable to live in the wake of that joy. It energized me. Whenever we would travel as a family, while everybody else was kind of planning the day or getting themselves going in the morning, my father would scoop me up. And if we were in Chicago, we'd go to the big public library in downtown Chicago. Or if we were in Boston, or if we were in some other city, he would always locate the biggest library and he would just go there. And I remember downtown Milwaukee Library, I must have been 7 or 8 years old. And he got me my first library card. It was orange, as I remember it. And they laminated it. And, the person at the counter handed it to my father. And then he handed it to me. The laminate was still warm. I can remember that. And the way he handed it to me, was so incredible. He told me to hold my hands out like this, right? And so I held my hands out, and he leaned down and he said, "Now, son, you do understand what I'm giving you. I'm giving you your freedom." I said, "What?" And he said, "Now you can learn anything you want to learn. And there's a free university in every city you will ever live in. You can go learn whatever you want to learn." Now, as a little kid, that didn't make sense to me, but he had tipped the first domino. The reason I tell you that backstory is because when I took this survey of character strengths, what was amazing to me was my number one character strength, and I was not aware of this. It's funny that the mantra or the tagline or the purpose statement for my company is grow, help others grow. I really didn't get it, though, until I started kind of meditating on what my father did, either by accident or by intention or both. My number one character strength is love of learning. This love of learning, that when I'm growing, I'm glowing, and I'm going, I'm moving forward. But not growth just for the sake of growth, not learning just for the sake of learning, but learning so that I could deploy the wisdom or the growth so that I could be of service to other people. If you don't close the loop or close the circuit, it doesn't really work. And there was so much joy in that. So fast forward, my dad is 80, he probably was 81 at the time. He was bedridden. He was living with my sister in Indiana. And I would leave work and drive up to Indiana just to see him, just to spend time with him. And whenever I would come in the room, my dad would ask me, "What are you reading?" And he knew I always keep this is before Kindle took over my life, but I would keep a bag of books in the car, and I'd say, "Well, I'm reading this." And he'd say, "Read it to me." And I would sit there, and I was my father's personal audible.com, right? That's pretty good. He didn't have to pay for any books. He just had me read them to him. And I would read these books to him. And I had just read an article or a book about reading. And the article talked about this form of reading called immersive reading. So you pick a subject, or you pick an author that you love, and you identify the 12 best books on that subject. And you read a book a month for a year. At the end of each month, you just write, for your own edification, investing in your own learning, you write a short essay about the book you just read, highlighting the things that you learned, highlighting the ways you might see that learning play out in your life. I became fascinated with the brain, this little 3-pound universe. And you're going to hear a lot about this today from people who are much more capable of describing to you just the splendor of the brain. And so I just started reading about the brain. And I read one book, and it led to another book, and it led to another book, and it led to another book. And my mind just opened up because I wanted to understand what made me tick, so that maybe I could learn to tick a little bit better. On the other side of the equation in my family, my father was a person who was a great optimist. He was fantastically optimistic. My mother strove for optimism, but it was a constant battle because of her battle with depression. My mother could turn it on. I mean, she had the most winsome smile. She was a people person, and she talked a lot. Like, I guess they say the average man says about 8,000 words a day, and the average woman says 25,000 words a day. I'm not trying to make any kind of sexist comment. This is what I read somewhere. My dad didn't use up his words, and my mother would use his unused words as rollover minutes. She was a producer. She was a teacher. She was a pretty incredible lady, but I watched her up close, and I watched her in the battle on a daily basis. She would have to turn on game face. Some of you in this room right now, you have your struggle with that. Like, if we were being real and transparent with each other, you had to get up to get into the room today. You had to climb a mountain to get here. For my mother, joy was Mount Everest. And there are many days I saw her die on the mountain. Many days I saw her plant the flag. I knew that within me, because of DNA, that I was made of pieces of him and pieces of her. And I really was scared of the pieces of her that I witnessed up close. In fact, it's what drove me to my higher purpose. My mother said I used to read the encyclopedia when I was a little boy, and she said I brought up a bunch of the volumes of the encyclopedia, and I had them spread out on the bed. And my mother says, and I don't remember the conversation, but she reminded me of this before she passed. She said, "You said to me, I'm going to find a way to help you find joy." She found great joy when she would hear me on the radio. And that's where I made that association between maybe as a communicator, I could leverage the skill of communication to bring somebody joy. I was trying to figure out the brain. How does it work? How do you have a possibility to create joy? Is it possible? And my father seemed to be, at least to me, he wasn't perfect, but he seemed to have this emotional durability that didn't have an edge to it. It just, he seemed to have an abiding joy. When I say enjoy your work or enjoy your life, could you make joy? Could you cause joy for yourself and others? Could you create joy? And what I started to see was in the science, especially the latest brain science, and I think you're going to hear a lot about neuroplasticity later today. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to adapt with experience, to change, to reform itself. That in fact, you're not necessarily stuck with the brain you were born with. That you literally could, through thought and through intervention and through practice, actually start to rewire your brain if it's already wired in a certain way, or pre-wire your brain so that it's set up to create for yourself this thing that I would call joy. And so what is joy? Joy is what I call cast iron hope, a sense of well-being that you're going to be okay. My grandmother told me about one of her best friends. Her house burned down. The kitchen burned down, and the kitchen is where the fire started. And when they went in through the rubble and wreckage, there was one thing that survived: this big cast iron skillet that she made the potatoes and stuff in. Because of what it was made of, it couldn't be easily consumed. Imagine your brain being so full of hope that it's kind of cast iron. It's armor plating for the soul. Joy is the ability to keep the pilot light of hope on, even when there's no fire on the stove. And joy is an operating system. Happiness is an app. So I'm not talking about happyology or just being happy all the time, but I'm talking about creating a mind and mindset, or as Doug Mapp would say, a brain set, if you will, that really will put you in a position to have a sustained sense of well-being. Well-being is a skill. Positive psychology built on this framework of PERMA, positive emotions, full engagement, positive relationships, meaning and accomplishment, that when we use those interventions and we wire ourselves, we literally can find ways to create or sustain this sense of joy. And that energy infects and affects everything we do and everybody we touch. We're here to serve. No matter what you think, we are here to serve other people. You won't find any life satisfaction in just being into yourself or about yourself. But if you can level up, if you can think up, if you can become better, then you can be deployed into the world in such a way that you start to really make a difference and an impact and to make life and to make the world better. The fact that you could think yourself up is such a powerful thing. And throughout my life, I have been more than willing to take responsibility for my actions, but never thought about my thinking. And as I started to read and research, it made me start to think about my thinking and to take ownership of my thinking. And that one thought, maybe I could change my wiring for the better, gave me so much hope. Here's the thing that struck me. You are where you are because of your mindset, and you will be where you end up because of your mindset. And here's the secret. It's your mind to set. And you set it with your habitual, persistent thinking. How you think, what you think. If you want to create a mind and mindset that is rich with joy, you have to think yourself there. One of the interventions I'll share with you, and then I'll wrap. Gratitude. I talk about a lot of different things. I talk about gratitude and personal relationships and work and growth. And exercise, sleep, and nutrition, and all of those things that add to that. But if I could leave you with one thing, is to begin to be grateful for your life very strategically. And the gratitude journaling is probably the one thing that gave and that gives me the most consistent lift and starts to create the positive energy. But it's also a habit. When you wake up in the morning, you write down 3 things for which you're grateful. You write down 3 things for which you're grateful. And it becomes really interesting if you get granular with it. If you find yourself just grateful for a great cup of coffee, or grateful for having a hot butt. And like I said, hot butt, I did say a hot butt. 30 years ago, I didn't have a car that had heated seats in it. This morning, as I came over to my office, when you write down things for which you're grateful, it starts to do something to the brain. But then underneath that, you write down 3 things that would make the day great. In other words, when you write down what you're going to do to make the day great, it starts to reveal to you your own agency, that you could have an impact on your day. You write down an affirmation, I am, and then declare something positive about yourself and over yourself. And then as you wind the day down, right before you go to sleep, you write down 3 amazing things that happened today, knowing that it doesn't have to be positive to be amazing. Some of the most amazing things that have happened to me that have been on their face negative, but they've been net positive and really amazing. Now, what you've done is, the more times you think in those patterns, you're laying down neural pathways. The pathways drop into habit. So all of a sudden, after about 67 days, you start to have a momentum on a new habit, right? And you start to wake up feeling grateful. When you start to write down things you're going to do to make the day great, after about 67 days, that momentum starts to form, and you start waking up with a sense of agency. After about 67 days, you get to this place where you're like, you're starting to feel like amazing things happen to me every day. Seligman says we're not Homo sapiens wise, we're Homo prospectus. We prospect what we expect. So when you change the architecture of your expectation, if you start to believe amazing things happen to me every day, then you're on the hunt for that every day, and you find what you're looking for. About 18 months is, I think, where we found where the wiring starts to really stick. And that all comes about by the way you think about your life, the way you think about your life, literally. When you think up, you go up. My father, before he passed away, gave closing statements to all of his kids. He wrote them out. And he said to one of my brothers this, he said, keep looking up, and then go where you're looking. You've got hundreds of billions of neurons making, well over 1 trillion neural connections. And the way it's wired is really something that you can influence and affect. And if you think up, you'll go up. And if you want joy in your life, you got to learn to think yourself there. And today is kind of a down payment on that. So as an opening salvo to our day, I hope that you are inspired to think up.
Halerin, thank you so much for setting this foundation for today. And there's so many points. My notes are all over. When I get excited and have new ideas, I start writing in circles. And so, one, we need to have like a 10-course meal together so that I can ask all of those questions. And 2, when you said hot butt, I grew up in Wisconsin and lived in Milwaukee for 15 years.
You understand.
There is joy in hot butt. Yes. And there's also joy in automatic start from your house. But 2 things I really want to highlight that you set the stage for with us today. And the one is ownership. That this is really about your choice to own your life and your perspective. What you read, what your father was choosing to read, what you chose to read with your card, set the stage for what came next in your life. And I love that not only is it ownership of insight, but that it's to not just know better, better, I believe is what the words. You wanted to learn so that you could tick better, serve better. So thank you for setting that stage. And one thing that's really also sticking out is 18 months. This isn't about try a gratitude journal for a week, and if it doesn't work, throw it out the window.
No, I think that's one of the things that I have really learned is that you can do it in micro doses. That's the thing that a lot of people don't understand is you don't have to do a whole lot. The consistency, Wendy Woods in her book, Good Habits, Bad Habits, about 43% of who we are is strictly habit. It's just habit. So if I can get it to drop down to the level of habit, the habit then, or that second nature, will start to pull me in the direction of my destiny as opposed to pushing. So I'd rather that you did 1 minute of gratitude journaling every day for the next 67 days than for you to say, I'm going to meditate every day for 2 hours. Forget that. Be consistent.
Great. Thank you. Folks, I invite you, a reminder here again, put some comments in the Q&A so that we can get some more nuggets of wisdom from Halerin after the summit. Halerin, thank you for your time today. For participants, we're going to move into an opportunity to discuss with other table participants what you've heard just now from Halerin. Your table hosts, go to a table that says someone's name with table hosts such as Bob Camp, Stacy Busby, Doug Mapp, et cetera, et cetera. Please join us at the table, and we're going to have a quick discussion about what we've heard from Halerin, and then we'll come back for our second speaker. Letting you know also, we do have rooms set in here for tiny breaks, so you can refill coffee, you can refill, dispose of the coffee by using the bathroom. We'll create space for you for that, so stay with us, fully present. We'll see you. And oh, one more quick thing as well. Holloway Event Company has us well in hand, so don't worry about where to go, when to go. They're going to pop us back in and out of presentation mode so that you do not miss a thing. We'll see you at the table.